She gripped his sleeve with fingers worn thin by years of cleaning his marble floors, her voice barely a whisper in the gleaming boardroom. "He knows about the money, sir. All of it." And in that instant, Khalil Mansouri realized that 23 years of carefully constructed lies were about to come crashing down. The 47th floor of Mansouri Tower pierced the Dubai skyline like a gleaming blade, and from behind his mahogany desk, Khalil Mansouri surveyed his empire with the satisfaction of a man who had never known defeat. The morning sun caught the gold threads in his pristine white thobe, as he dismissed his third assistant of the week with a wave that could have swatted a fly. "Your incompetence is costing me money," he said, without looking up from his tablet, his voice carrying the casual cruelty of someone who had forgotten what kindness felt like. "Security will escort you out." The young man's face crumpled, but Khalil had already moved on to the next item demanding his attention. In his world, people were expendable, cogs in a machine that generated the kind of wealth that could buy nations, or at least their leaders. 3 floors below, in the service corridors that the wealthy never saw, Jamal Williams moved with the quiet efficiency of someone who had learned to be invisible. At 28, he possessed the kind of understated strength that came from years of watching, waiting, and remembering. His maintenance uniform was pressed and clean, his tools organized with military precision, but his eyes held depths that spoke of intelligence far beyond his station. He paused outside the boardroom, where his mother, Fatima, was setting up for the morning's meeting. Through the glass, he could see her weathered hands arranging crystal water glasses with the same care she had once used to tend her garden back in Detroit before everything changed. Before Khalil Mansouri entered their lives like a hurricane and left nothing but wreckage in his wake. "Morning, Mama," Jamal said softly as he entered the room. Fatima's face lit up with the kind of love that had sustained them through 23 years of struggling in a foreign country. "Habibi, you shouldn't be here. If Mr. Mansouri sees you, let him see me." Jamal's voice carried an edge that made his mother stop arranging glasses and really look at him. "Jamal, no. Whatever you're thinking, don't. We have good jobs here. We can't afford to lose them." But Jamal was staring at the portrait on the wall, a younger Khalil Mansouri shaking hands with some dignitary, his smile sharp as a scimitar. "He doesn't even remember us, does he? Doesn't remember what he took." Fatima's hands trembled as she set down the last glass. "Some things are better left buried." "Not this time, Mama. Not anymore." The elevator chimed, and through the glass walls, they could see Khalil approaching with his entourage of yes-men and sycophants. Jamal watched the man who had haunted his family's nightmares stride past without so much as acknowledging the woman who cleaned his toilets and organized his life. 23 years, Jamal whispered. 23 years of watching him live off what should have been ours. Khalil settled into his chair at the head of the conference table, immediately launching into his agenda without bothering to acknowledge the staff preparing the room. "The Shanghai deal needs to close by Friday, or I'm replacing the entire team. No excuses, no extensions." His executives nodded like bobblehead dolls, but Jamal saw something else in their eyes, fear masquerading as respect. This was a man who ruled through intimidation, who had forgotten that power without humanity was just sophisticated tyranny. As the meeting began, Jamal slipped back into the service corridor, but his mind was already 3 steps ahead. In his apartment, hidden beneath a loose floorboard, lay a folder that contained the truth about Khalil Mansouri's empire. Documents his father had kept, evidence his mother thought was lost forever, proof that the $250 million that had launched the Mansouri dynasty belonged to someone else entirely. His phone buzzed with a text from his supervisor. "Building inspection tomorrow. All maintenance staff report early." Jamal smiled for the first time in months. Perfect. He pulled out his own phone and typed a message he had been composing in his mind for years. "Mr. Mansouri, we need to talk about my father's invention and the $250 million you stole. Tomorrow, 6 a.m., your office. Come alone or the whole world will know what kind of man you really are." His finger hovered over the send button for a long moment. Once he pressed it, there would be no going back. The invisible boy would finally step into the light, and the man who had destroyed his family would have to face the consequences of his choices. Jamal pressed send. In the boardroom above, Khalil's phone buzzed against the mahogany table. Before we continue with this incredible journey of redemption and unexpected connection, take a moment to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell. Stories like this take time to craft, and your support helps us bring you more emotional, life-changing content. The message arrived at 11:47 p.m., just as Khalil was reviewing quarterly projections in his penthouse office. The unknown number should have been filtered by his security systems, but somehow this single text had slipped through every barrier he'd built around his digital life. His fingers froze over the screen. "Mr. Mansouri, we need to talk about my father's invention and the $250 million you stole. Tomorrow, 6 a.m., your office. Come alone, or the whole world will know what kind of man you really are." The words hit him like physical blows. His breath caught in his throat, and for a moment the most powerful man in the Middle East felt like a frightened child again. The tablet slipped from his hands, clattering against the marble floor. "Impossible," he whispered to the empty room. "It's impossible." But even as he said it, his mind was racing backward through time, pulling up memories he had spent decades burying. A cramped apartment in Detroit. A brilliant man with calloused hands and kind eyes. A handshake that had sealed a deal, and a betrayal. Austin Williams. The name surfaced like a ghost rising from still water. Khalil's hands shook as he called his head of security. "Ahmad, I need a trace on a phone number. Now." "Sir, it's nearly midnight." "Now." 20 minutes later, Ahmad called back. "Sir, the number is registered to a Jamal Williams. He works in building maintenance. Day shift supervisor approved his security clearance 3 years ago. Clean background check. No criminal record. His mother works as—" Khalil ended the call. He knew exactly who Jamal's mother was. The night stretched endlessly. Khalil paced his office like a caged predator, his mind churning through possibilities. How much did the boy know? What did he want? And most terrifyingly, what proof did he have? At 5:30 a.m., Khalil sat behind his desk in the same clothes he'd worn the previous day, his usually immaculate appearance betraying the sleepless night. His coffee had gone cold hours ago, untouched. Every muscle in his body was coiled tight, waiting. The elevator chimed at exactly 6 a.m. Khalil watched through the glass walls as a young man stepped into the reception area. Even from a distance, the resemblance was unmistakable. The same intelligent eyes, the same determined set to his jaw. Austin Williams had passed more than just his DNA to his son. Jamal walked through the outer office with the quiet confidence of someone who belonged there, despite wearing a simple maintenance uniform instead of a $1,000 suit. He carried a manila folder under his arm like it contained the secrets of the universe. Maybe it did. "Mr. Mansouri." Jamal's voice was steady as he entered the office, closing the door behind him with deliberate care. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with me." Khalil forced his features into the mask of cold authority that had served him for decades. "I didn't agree to anything. You threatened me." "I stated a fact." Jamal moved closer to the desk, and Khalil caught a whiff of something that made his chest tighten. The same soap his own mother had used, back when they had lived in a 2-room house in Beirut and luxury, was having enough bread for dinner. "You look like him," Khalil found himself saying, then immediately cursed the admission. "People tell me that." Jamal set the folder on the mahogany desk between them. "But I have something he never did." "And what's that?" "The complete truth about what you did to my family." The words hung in the air like smoke from a gun barrel. Khalil stared at the folder as if it might burst into flames. Inside those manila walls lay either his destruction or his salvation, and he had no idea which. "Your father was a brilliant man," Khalil said carefully. "But business is business. I offered him a fair deal." "A fair deal?" Jamal's composure cracked for the first time, revealing the molten anger beneath. "You offered him $50,000 for an invention worth hundreds of millions. When he refused, you stole his blueprints and patents. You destroyed his reputation and made it impossible for him to get funding anywhere else. I offered him partnership. You offered him scraps from a table that should have been his. Jamal slammed his hand down on the desk, and the sound echoed through the office like a gunshot. My father died, believing he was a failure. My mother cleaned houses for 20 years because you made sure no engineering firm would hire him. We lived in poverty while you built an empire on his genius. Khalil's mouth had gone dry. The boy's pain was so raw, so immediate, that it seemed to fill the room like a living thing. That was a long time ago. Business was different then, more competitive. Business? Jamal laughed, but there was no humor in it. Is that what you call theft now? Market competition? He opened the folder, and Khalil saw the edge of familiar documents, blueprints, patent applications, correspondence. His own signature on contracts that he had hoped were lost to time. My father kept copies of everything, Jamal continued, his voice growing stronger with each word. Every meeting, every promise you broke, every lie you told. He documented it all, because he believed in justice. He believed that truth would eventually win. What would you do if you discovered that your success was built on someone else's stolen dreams? Share your thoughts below. We read every comment. What do you want? Khalil's voice came out as barely more than a whisper. What I want. Jamal leaned back, and for the first time since entering the office, he smiled. It wasn't a pleasant expression. I want my father's name cleared. I want the world to know that Austin Williams invented the filtration system that made you billions. I want every newspaper, every business journal, every trade publication to understand that the great Khalil Mansouri is nothing but a sophisticated thief. The words hit Khalil like physical blows. His empire, his reputation, his children's future, everything balanced on the edge of this moment. You'll destroy both of us. My companies employ thousands of people. The scandal would what? Force you to live like we have. Force you to work 3 jobs just to keep a roof over your head. Jamal's eyes blazed with decades of suppressed fury. My mother's hands are destroyed from scrubbing your floors, Mr. Mansouri. She's worked in your building for 3 years, and you've never once looked at her as if she were human. The accusation landed with surgical precision. Khalil realized he couldn't even remember the woman's face clearly, despite seeing her almost daily. She was furniture to him. Part of the invisible machinery that kept his world running smoothly. But Jamal continued, his voice dropping to something softer, more dangerous. I'm not my father. I don't believe justice always wins. Sometimes it has to be taken. He reached into his jacket and pulled out his phone. One call to the Washington Post. One email to Al Jazeera. One upload to social media. The story writes itself. Arab billionaire builds empire on stolen American innovation. David and Goliath for the digital age. Khalil's world narrowed to the size of that phone screen. Everything he had built, everything he had become, could be destroyed by the touch of a finger. What will it take to make this go away? Nothing can make this go away, Mr. Mansouri. This isn't about money. This is about a debt that can never be repaid. Jamal pocketed his phone and picked up the folder. But maybe it's about something else entirely. He turned toward the door, then paused. You have until noon to decide how this story ends. You can be the villain who stole a dying man's dreams, or you can be something else entirely. The choice is yours. Wait. The word tore from Khalil's throat before he could stop it. What do you mean something else? Jamal looked back over his shoulder, and for just a moment Khalil saw something in the young man's eyes that wasn't anger or hatred. It was something far more dangerous. Hope. Figure it out, Mr. Mansouri. You built an empire on someone else's genius. Let's see if you're smart enough to build something real on your own. The door closed with a soft click, leaving Khalil alone with the weight of 23 years of buried truth. Outside the office, Jamal walked to the elevator on unsteady legs, his heart hammering against his ribs. He had done it. He had looked the monster of his childhood in the eye and watched him flinch. But as the elevator descended, he found himself thinking not about victory, but about the fear he had seen in Khalil Mansouri's eyes. It was the same fear he had carried his entire life, the terror of being found wanting, of being exposed as less than what the world believed you to be. For the first time in 23 years, Jamal wondered if he and Khalil Mansouri might have more in common than he had ever imagined. The thought should have comforted him. Instead, it terrified him. Khalil stared at his reflection in the bathroom mirror of his executive suite, his hands gripping the marble countertop until his knuckles went white. The man looking back at him had aged a decade in the span of an hour. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and his usually perfect beard showed streaks of premature gray he had never noticed before. "This is insane," he whispered to his reflection. One maintenance worker, one nobody with a folder full of old papers. But even as he said the words, he knew they were lies. Jamal Williams wasn't a nobody. He was the son of Austin Williams, the brilliant engineer whose innovations had become the foundation of Khalil's water purification empire. The man whose trust Khalil had betrayed so completely that it had haunted his dreams for over 2 decades. His phone rang. Ahmad, his head of security. "Sir, I've pulled everything on Jamal Williams. 28 years old, engineering degree from University of Michigan. Full scholarship. Graduated summa cum laude but never worked in the field. Been in Dubai for 3 years, model employee according to his supervisors. Lives in a studio apartment in International City with his mother." What about his background? Any debts? Gambling problems? Women? "Clean as a whistle, sir. Actually, sir, there's something else. His father's patents. I had our legal team run a search." Khalil's blood turned to ice. The original filings show significant similarities to our foundational technologies. If someone wanted to make a case for intellectual property theft, that's enough. Khalil ended the call, his hands shaking. He tried to return to his morning routine, reviewing reports, approving deals, making the decisions that moved millions of dollars across continents. But the numbers blurred together, and every signature felt like he was signing his own death warrant. At 9 a.m., his assistant knocked on the door. "Sir, the board meeting for the Singapore expansion." "Cancel it." "Sir, the investors flew in from—" "I said, cancel it." The words exploded from him with such force that his assistant actually stumbled backward. Khalil had never raised his voice in the office before. Control was everything in his world. But control was exactly what he was losing. 3 floors below, Jamal sat in the maintenance break room, staring at a cup of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. His phone buzzed every few minutes with calls from unknown numbers. Khalil's people, no doubt, trying to find angles, weaknesses, pressure points. "You look like you've seen a ghost, Habibi." His mother's voice made him look up. Fatima stood in the doorway, her face creased with worry. She had traded her cleaning uniform for street clothes, a flowing blue hijab, and a simple dress that couldn't hide the elegance she carried despite decades of hard labor. "Mama, you should be upstairs. Your shift." "My shift can wait." She sat across from him, her weathered hands covering his. "What have you done, Jamal?" He wanted to lie, to protect her from the storm that was coming. But those hands had worked themselves raw to keep him fed, to pay for his education, to give him the chances his father never had. She deserved the truth. "I told him I know about Baba's invention, about the money." Fatima's face went pale. "Ya Allah, Jamal, no, we agreed." "You agreed. I never agreed to let that man live off Baba's genius while we scraped by." He pulled his hands free, standing to pace the small room. "Do you know what he pays for a single lunch at that restaurant on the 45th floor? More than you make in a week scrubbing his toilets." "Money isn't everything. It is when you don't have it." The words came out harsher than he intended, and he saw his mother flinch. He immediately softened his voice. "Mama, you've worked yourself to the bone for 23 years. Your hands shake from arthritis because you've cleaned so many floors. Your back aches every morning because you've bent over so many sinks. And for what? So Khalil Mansouri can buy another yacht?" Fatima was quiet for a long moment, her fingers worrying at the edge of her hijab. Your father wouldn't have wanted this. He believed in forgiveness. Baba died believing he was a failure. He never knew that his invention made someone else rich beyond imagining. Jamal knelt beside her chair, taking her damaged hands in his. Don't you want his name cleared? Don't you want the world to know that Austin Williams was a genius? Tears gathered in her eyes. I want my son to be safe. I want us to keep the life we've built here. It's not much, but it's ours. What if it could be more? What if we could have what was always rightfully ours? Before she could answer, Jamal's phone rang. Unknown number. He let it go to voicemail, but 30 seconds later, it rang again. Same number. Answer it, Fatima said quietly. Running won't make this go away. Jamal swiped to accept the call. Yes? Mr. Williams, this is Ahmad Khalil, head of security for Mansouri Industries. Mr. Mansouri would like to schedule a meeting to discuss your concerns. How far would you go to clear a loved one's name? Sometimes the cost of justice is higher than we expect. Tell us your thoughts in the comments. I already had a meeting with Mr. Mansouri. I told him he has until noon. Mr. Mansouri is prepared to offer compensation for any misunderstandings regarding your father's work. Perhaps we could discuss a reasonable settlement. You think this is about money? Jamal's voice carried across the break room. Your boss stole my father's life's work and let him die thinking he was worthless. There's no settlement for that kind of damage. Everything has a price, Mr. Williams. Name yours. The line went dead. Jamal stared at the phone, his chest tight with rage. They still didn't understand. This wasn't a negotiation. It was a reckoning. Back in his office, Khalil paced behind his desk like a caged animal. The call to Williams had been Ahmad's idea, but Khalil could have predicted the result. The boy wasn't motivated by greed. He was motivated by something far more dangerous, righteous fury, and a need for vindication. Sir? Ahmad knocked and entered without waiting for permission. The call didn't go well. He's not interested in money. I gathered that. Khalil stopped pacing and stared out at the Dubai skyline. From up here, the city looked perfect, gleaming towers reaching toward heaven, a testament to human ambition and achievement. But he knew that beneath the surface, in the service corridors and forgotten corners, lived the people whose labor made such beauty possible. People like Fatima Williams, whose name he had never bothered to learn despite seeing her nearly every day for 3 years. What about pressure? Ahmad continued. Immigration status, work permits, building violations in their apartment. No. The word came out with surprising force. No intimidation. Ahmad looked confused. Sir, with respect, that's usually your preferred. I said no. Khalil turned from the window, his jaw set. This isn't a business negotiation. This is something else. Something he couldn't name yet, but felt in his bones. A reckoning that had been 23 years in the making. His intercom buzzed. Sir, there's a woman here to see you. Says it's about her son. Khalil's heart stopped. He knew, without being told, exactly who was waiting in his reception area. Send her in. The door opened, and Fatima Williams entered his office with quiet dignity. She was smaller than he had expected, her frame worn thin by decades of hard work, but her eyes held a strength that reminded him powerfully of her son. Mrs. Williams. Khalil found himself standing, a gesture of respect he hadn't made to a visitor in years. Please, sit. She remained standing. Mr. Mansouri, my son is angry. He has every right to be angry, but I know you're not the monster he believes you are. The words hit him like a physical blow. How can you say that, after what I did to your family? Because I've watched you for 3 years. I've seen you with your children when they visit. I've seen you take phone calls from your mother in Beirut, speaking to her with such tenderness. Her voice was soft but steady. Bad men don't love their families the way you love yours. Khalil felt something crack inside his chest. This woman he had never truly seen, had been watching him, understanding him, even as he remained blind to her existence. That doesn't excuse what I did to your husband. No, she agreed. It doesn't. But maybe it explains why you did it. You were young, ambitious, desperate to prove yourself. You made a terrible choice, but that doesn't make you a terrible man. Your son doesn't see it that way. Fatima's eyes grew sad. My son carries his father's pain like a stone in his chest. It's made him strong, but it's also made him hard. He thinks destroying you will heal that wound. And you don't? She was quiet for a long moment, studying his face with those penetrating eyes. I think some wounds can only be healed by forgiveness. But forgiveness isn't free, Mr. Mansouri. It requires truth, all of it. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Khalil realized that this quiet, seemingly powerless woman understood something that he and her son had both missed. This wasn't about money, or even justice. It was about the possibility of redemption. What are you asking me to do? I'm asking you to remember who you were before you became what you are. I'm asking you to find the man who once shook hands with my husband and meant it. She moved closer to his desk, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. And I'm asking you to help me save my son from becoming someone he'll hate when this is over. Before Khalil could respond, she turned and walked toward the door. At the threshold, she paused. You have until noon, Mr. Mansouri. But the choice isn't really about what story gets told to the world. It's about what story you want to tell yourself for the rest of your life. The door closed with the same soft click as when her son had left hours earlier. Khalil sank into his chair, his head in his hands. For the first time in 23 years, he allowed himself to remember Austin Williams not as a business obstacle, but as the man he had been, brilliant, trusting, and kind enough to believe that a handshake still meant something. The man whose trust he had destroyed, whose family he had condemned to decades of struggle, whose son now carried a burden of anger that threatened to consume them all. The clock on his wall ticked toward noon, each second bringing him closer to a choice that would define not just his future, but his soul. At 11:45 a.m., 15 minutes before Jamal's deadline, every screen in Mansouri Tower went black. The building's emergency lighting flickered on as the main power grid failed, trapping elevators between floors and sealing electronic locks throughout the 47-story structure. In the basement, backup generators hummed to life, but the building's sophisticated security system had defaulted to full lockdown mode. Nobody was getting in or out. Khalil stood at his window watching the chaos unfold in the street below as emergency vehicles surrounded his tower. His phone had no signal. The building's cellular repeaters were down with everything else. For a man who controlled a multi-billion-dollar empire through constant communication, the silence was suffocating. A knock at his door made him turn. Come in. Ahmad entered, his usually perfect composure cracked by frustration. Sir, it's a complete system failure. It says it could take hours to restore power safely. The fire department won't let anyone leave until they can verify the building's structural systems. How long? Minimum 4 hours. Maybe more. Khalil's jaw tightened. 4 hours trapped in a building with Jamal Williams and a deadline that had already passed. The irony wasn't lost on him. The master of control, stripped of every advantage except the truth he had been running from for 23 years. Sir, Ahmad continued, there's something else. The Williams boy. He's stuck in the service elevator between the second and third floors. Maintenance is trying to get him out. For reasons he couldn't explain, Khalil found himself moving toward the door. Show me. The service elevator was a cramped metal box designed for equipment, not people. Through the small window in the door, Khalil could see Jamal sitting calmly on the floor, his back against the wall, the manila folder beside him like a faithful companion. The manual release is jammed, the maintenance supervisor explained. We'll need to wait for the fire department to bring proper extraction equipment. How long? Could be an hour, maybe 2. Khalil studied the young man through the window. Jamal didn't look panicked or claustrophobic. He looked patient, as if he had been waiting for this moment his entire life. Open the door above, Khalil said suddenly. Sir. The elevator is stopped between floors. Open the door on the 3rd floor. We can lower a ladder. The supervisor looked confused. Sir, that's not really safe. We should wait for... Open the door. 20 minutes later, Khalil found himself lying flat on the third-floor corridor, his expensive suit pressed against industrial carpeting as he peered down into the elevator shaft. Jamal looked up at him with an expression that was equal parts surprise and suspicion. Mr. Mansouri, what are you doing? Helping. Khalil secured the emergency ladder that Ahmad had found in a supply closet. Unless you prefer to wait for the fire department. I'm fine waiting. I'm not. Khalil's voice carried an edge of honesty that surprised them both. We need to talk, and apparently, the universe has decided we're going to do it whether we want to or not. Jamal stared up at him for a long moment, then grabbed the manila folder and began climbing. The third floor of Mansouri Tower housed the company's research and development division, a maze of laboratories and testing facilities that most employees never saw. With the power out, emergency lighting cast everything in an eerie red glow that made shadows dance like ghosts. Khalil led Jamal to a small conference room with a view of the city. Through the window, they could see the controlled chaos below, police cars, fire trucks, and news vans surrounding the building. Looks like your deadline has passed, Khalil observed, settling into a chair across from Jamal. The day isn't over yet. Jamal placed the folder on the table between them, his hand resting protectively on its surface. They sat in silence for several minutes, each man taking the measure of the other in the strange red twilight. Without the armor of his executive suite and the power of his position, Khalil looked smaller, more human. Without the righteous fury that had carried him through the morning, Jamal seemed younger, more uncertain. Your mother came to see me, Khalil said finally. Jamal's hand tightened on the folder. She had no right. She had every right. This concerns her as much as it concerns you. Khalil leaned back in his chair, studying the young man's face. She thinks I'm not a monster. She's always seen the good in people. It's her weakness. Is it, or is it her strength? The question hung in the air between them. Jamal shifted uncomfortably, his certainty beginning to crack under the weight of genuine conversation. When someone shows you unexpected kindness, does it change how you see them or how you see yourself? We'd love to hear your thoughts below. You want to know what I remember about your father? Khalil continued, his voice softer now. I remember that he made the best coffee I'd ever tasted. Turkish style, with cardamom. He'd brew it in this little copper pot while we worked on the designs. Jamal's composure slipped for just a moment. He learned that from his grandfather, said coffee was meant to be shared, not rushed. He was right. I haven't had coffee that good since. Khalil's eyes grew distant. He used to talk about you, you know, about how proud he was, that his son was so smart, so driven. He said you were going to change the world. Don't. The word came out sharper than Jamal intended. Don't try to manipulate me with memories. I'm not trying to manipulate you. I'm trying to remember. Khalil met his eyes across the table. For 23 years, I've told myself that what happened between your father and me was just business. That he was naive, that the world was competitive, that I did what I had to do to survive. Because that's easier than admitting you're a thief. Yes, Khalil said simply. It is easier. But it's not true. The admission seemed to surprise them both. Jamal's anger, which had burned so brightly all morning, flickered like a candle in a sudden draft. Then tell me the truth, he said quietly. All of it. Khalil was quiet for a long moment, his fingers tracing patterns on the conference table's surface. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of decades. I was 26 years old, desperate to prove myself in a country that saw me as nothing more than another immigrant with big dreams and empty pockets. I had a degree from MIT, but no connections, no family wealth, no access to the networks that mattered. He paused, gathering the courage to continue. Your father was different. He didn't see my accent or my background. He saw my ideas, my passion for the work. When he showed me his filtration design, I knew it could change everything, not just for water purification, but for how the world thought about environmental technology. So you stole it. So I convinced myself I was saving it. Khalil's voice grew harder, more self-aware. I told myself that Austin was too trusting, too naive for the business world, that his invention would be buried in bureaucracy or stolen by someone less scrupulous than me. I convinced myself I was the hero of the story. Jamal leaned forward, his eyes never leaving Khalil's face, and the $50,000 was all I had, every penny I could scrape together, borrow, or beg for. I thought, if I could just get the patents filed first, if I could get the prototype funded, then I could bring Austin in as a partner. Equal shares, equal control. But you didn't. No, I didn't. Khalil's voice dropped to barely above a whisper, because by the time the money started coming in, I had already learned to justify everything. The patents were in my name. The investors knew me, not him. The company was my vision, my risk, my sacrifice. While my father lost everything. While your father lost everything, Khalil agreed, and I told myself he would be fine, that he was smart enough to invent something else, to start over. I never imagined that he would spend the rest of his life believing he was a failure, that he would work himself into an early grave trying to prove he was worth something, that his family would struggle for decades because of what you took. The words hit Khalil like physical blows. In the red emergency lighting, his face looked haggard, older than his 51 years. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," he said finally. "I don't deserve it. I'm just trying to give you the truth you asked for." Jamal stared at him for a long moment, then opened the manila folder. The documents inside seemed to glow in the strange light. Patents, blueprints, correspondence, and financial records that told the story of a brilliant man's betrayal. "This is my father's original design," Jamal said, pulling out a blueprint covered in careful engineering notation. "Look at the date." Khalil looked. The design was dated 3 months before his own patent filing. "And this," Jamal continued, producing a letter, "is correspondence from the patent office, rejecting my father's application, because yours was already on file." The evidence was damning, irrefutable. But as Khalil stared at Austin Williams's careful handwriting, he felt something unexpected, not fear of exposure, but genuine grief for what he had destroyed. "He drew this by hand," Khalil observed, tracing the precise lines with his finger. "I remember watching him work. He never used CAD software, said it put too much distance between the engineer and the design. He taught me to draw the same way." Jamal's voice had lost its edge of anger, replaced by something softer, more vulnerable. "Said engineering was art as much as science, that if you couldn't draw it, you didn't really understand it." They sat in companionable silence, two men separated by decades of pain, but united by memories of Austin Williams, one who had loved him, one who had betrayed him. "What happens now?" Khalil asked. Jamal looked up from the blueprints, and for the first time since entering the building, he looked uncertain. "I don't know. This morning, I thought I knew exactly what I wanted. Justice, vindication, your destruction. And now I'm sitting in a conference room with the man who destroyed my family, and he's crying over my father's blueprints." Jamal's voice carried a note of wonder. "This wasn't how I imagined it would go." Khalil wiped his eyes, embarrassed by the display of emotion. "Your mother was right. You're going to have to decide what kind of man you want to be when this is over. What kind of man do you want to be?" The question caught Khalil off guard. For 23 years, he had focused on what he wanted to have, what he wanted to achieve, what he wanted to control. The question of what kind of man he wanted to be had never occurred to him. "I want to be the man your father thought I was when he shook my hand," he said finally, "before I proved him wrong." Outside, the first drops of rain began to streak the conference room windows, and somewhere in the building's depths, the backup generators continued their steady hum. They were still trapped together, still separated by decades of pain and betrayal. But something had shifted in the space between them, something fragile and new and impossibly dangerous. Something that felt almost like hope. The rain began in earnest as evening approached, turning the world beyond the windows into a watercolor painting of blurred lights and shadow. In the conference room, Khalil and Jamal had barely moved from their positions, the manila folder's contents spread between them, like pieces of a puzzle that had taken 23 years to complete. "There's something else," Jamal said quietly, reaching into his jacket. He pulled out a small digital recorder, its red light blinking steadily. "My father wasn't as naive as you thought." Khalil's blood went cold. "What is that?" "Insurance." Jamal set the device on the table with deliberate care. "Before he died, my father recorded everything he could remember about your partnership. Every conversation, every promise, every detail of how you manipulated him." The small machine seemed to fill the room with its presence. Khalil stared at it as if it were a loaded gun. "He made this recording in the hospital," Jamal continued, his voice thick with emotion. 3 days before he died. His voice was so weak the nurses had to ask me to translate parts of it. "He was dying, Mr. Mansouri, and he spent his last coherent moments trying to protect his family from what you had done." Jamal pressed play. The voice that filled the room was barely recognizable. Weak, labored, but unmistakably Austin Williams. Even through the static, his intelligence and dignity came through. "My name is Austin Williams. I'm recording this on March 15th, 2001, at Henry Ford Hospital in Detroit. If anyone is listening to this, it means I'm gone, and my family needs the truth to survive." Khalil closed his eyes, transported back to that cramped apartment where he and Austin had dreamed of changing the world together. "I want to tell you about a young man named Khalil Mansouri. Brilliant engineer, MIT graduate, full of fire and ambition. When he came to me with his vision for revolutionizing water purification, I believed in him completely. Maybe that was my mistake." The recording crackled with age and emotion, but Austin's words were clear, methodical, the testimony of an engineer who understood the importance of precision. "I showed Khalil my filtration designs in September of 1978. Complete schematics, chemical compositions, manufacturing processes, everything. I thought we were partners. I thought we were friends." Khalil's hands were shaking now. Hearing Austin's voice again after all these years was like having his conscience given auditory form. "The last time I saw Khalil was January 3rd, 1979. He came to my apartment with a contract, $50,000 for all rights to my invention. He said it was just a formality, that we'd be equal partners once the funding came through. I trusted him." Jamal paused the recording, watching Khalil's face carefully. "Do you remember that day?" "Yes," Khalil whispered. "I remember everything about that day." "Tell me." Khalil was quiet for a long moment, his mind pulling up memories he had spent decades trying to bury. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of accumulated guilt. "I remember that it was snowing, big wet flakes that turned to slush the moment they hit the ground. I remember that your mother was making dinner, something with cinnamon that made the whole apartment smell like home." He paused, lost in the past. "I remember that you were there, maybe 5 years old, playing with wooden blocks in the corner. You looked up at me when I came in, and you smiled. Just smiled, like I was someone worth smiling at." Jamal's composure cracked slightly. He had no memory of that day, but hearing it described made him feel like he was losing something he hadn't known he'd had. "Your father made coffee," Khalil continued. "That perfect Turkish coffee. And while we drank it, he talked about his dreams. Not for money or fame, but for making clean water available to people who had never had it. He said his invention could save millions of lives. And you stole it anyway." "And I stole it anyway." Khalil's voice was flat, matter of fact, because I had already decided that I was the one who could make those dreams real, that I was the one with the vision, the connections, the ruthlessness to navigate the business world. Jamal pressed play again. "I signed the contract because Khalil looked me in the eye and promised we were partners. He said the patents had to be in one name for legal reasons, but that we'd share everything equally. He said he needed me, that my invention would change the world." Austin's voice grew weaker, more labored. 2 months later, I saw the news story. Mansouri Industries had secured $15 million in venture capital funding. Khalil was being hailed as a visionary, the inventor of revolutionary water purification technology. My technology. The pain in Austin's voice was raw, immediate, as fresh as if the betrayal had happened yesterday instead of decades ago. I tried calling him. His secretary said he was unavailable. I tried going to his office. Security wouldn't let me past the lobby. I wrote letters. They were returned, unopened. Why didn't he sue? Khalil asked, though he suspected he knew the answer. With what money? What lawyer would take the case of a broke engineer against a rising corporate star? Jamal's voice was bitter, but that wasn't the worst part. He fast-forwarded the recording. The worst part wasn't losing the money or the recognition. The worst part was watching my son grow up believing his father was a failure. Watching my wife work herself to exhaustion because I couldn't provide for my family. The worst part was dying, knowing that I never achieved anything worth remembering. The words hung in the air like an accusation. Khalil felt something break inside his chest, not just guilt, but a profound grief for the man he had destroyed, and the man he had become in the process. He was wrong, Khalil said quietly. He achieved something extraordinary. He created technology that has provided clean water to millions of people. He never got credit for it. Because you stole that too. Yes, because I stole that too. Jamal turned off the recorder, and the silence that followed felt deeper than the emergency lighting around them. Outside, the storm was intensifying, rain lashing against the windows with increasing violence. There's more, Jamal said, pulling out another document. After my father died, my mother tried to get work as a seamstress, a cleaner, anything that would let her support us. But somehow, every job she applied for fell through at the last minute. Every apartment we tried to rent suddenly became unavailable. Every loan application was rejected. He slid the document across the table. It was a private investigator's report, dated just 6 months ago. I hired someone to look into our family's history. Guess what he found? Khalil's eyes scanned the report, and with each line, his face grew paler. The document detailed a systematic campaign of economic harassment, phone calls to employers, reports to credit agencies, pressure on landlords, all traced back to a private security firm that had worked exclusively for Mansouri Industries in the early 2000s. You didn't just steal my father's invention, Jamal said, his voice deadly quiet. You made sure his family could never recover from it. You wanted to erase us completely. I didn't, Khalil started, then stopped. The evidence was right there in black and white, his signature on the authorization forms. I did authorize this. Ahmad's predecessor convinced me it was necessary to prevent legal complications. Legal complications. Jamal laughed, but there was no humor in it. Is that what you called destroying a widow and her 5-year-old son? How do we live with the consequences of choices we made when we were desperate to succeed? Share your thoughts. Sometimes the past refuses to stay buried. I was terrified, Khalil admitted. The words torn from somewhere deep inside him. Your father was brilliant, respected in engineering circles. If he had ever gotten the resources to fight back, if he had ever found lawyers willing to take the case. So you made sure he never could. So I made sure he never could. Khalil's voice was barely audible. I told myself it was just business, that I was protecting my investment, my employees, my future. I never thought about what it was doing to you and your mother. Because we weren't real to you. We were just obstacles. The words hit home because they were absolutely true. For 23 years, Khalil had managed to think of the Williams family as abstract concepts rather than living, breathing human beings whose lives he had shattered. Why Dubai? He asked suddenly. Why did you and your mother come here? Jamal was quiet for a moment, then reached into the folder and pulled out a yellowed newspaper clipping. The headline read, Mansouri Industries opens Middle East headquarters in Dubai. When I turned 18, I made my mother a promise. I told her that someday I would clear my father's name and make things right. For 15 years, I watched from America as you built your empire on his genius. Then 3 years ago, I saw this article, and I knew it was time. You came here to destroy me. I came here to get close to you, to understand how you think, how you operate, what matters to you. Jamal's eyes were steady, determined. I got a job in your building. My mother got a job cleaning your offices. We became invisible people in your world, watching and waiting for the right moment. And this is it? The right moment? I thought it was. Jamal looked down at his hands, suddenly seeming much younger than his 28 years. But sitting here, listening to you, admit what you did, seeing you cry over my father's designs, I don't know anymore. The confession seemed to surprise him as much as it surprised Khalil. What don't you know? I don't know if destroying you will bring my father back. I don't know if revenge will heal the wound in my mother's heart. I don't know if justice and vengeance are the same thing. Jamal met Khalil's eyes across the table. I spent 23 years imagining this moment, and now that it's here, I feel empty. The rain continued to pound against the windows, and somewhere in the building, the backup generators hummed their mechanical lullaby. Two men sat in the red glow of emergency lighting, surrounded by the evidence of betrayal and the weight of choices that could never be undone. What do you want from me? Khalil asked. I want my father's name on every patent, every product, every piece of technology that came from his genius. I want the world to know that Austin Williams was the real inventor, and that you spent 23 years living a lie. That would destroy everything I've built. Yes, it would. My children, my employees, my investors, thousands of people would suffer. Like my family suffered. Khalil nodded slowly. You're right, they would suffer like your family suffered. The question is, does that make it justice? Or does it just make more victims? It was a question that neither of them could answer. Not yet. The storm outside had settled into a steady rhythm, and somewhere in the building's depths, a maintenance crew was working by flashlight to restore power. In the conference room, Khalil and Jamal sat in exhausted silence. The weight of 23 years of truth finally laid bare between them. I need some air, Khalil said finally, standing and moving to the window. The glass was cool against his forehead as he stared out at the rain-soaked city below. In Beirut when I was a boy, my father used to say that storms wash the world clean, that after the rain, everything looks different. Jamal remained seated, but his posture had relaxed slightly. My father used to say something similar. He said storms were just the Earth's way of starting over. Smart man. Smarter than me, apparently. He would have found a way to forgive you by now. The admission hung in the air, surprising them both. Khalil turned from the window, studying Jamal's face in the red emergency lighting. What makes you think that? Because he forgave everyone. The landlord who evicted us when I was 7. The employers who fired him for being difficult when he tried to protect his work. Even the doctors who couldn't save him. Jamal's voice grew soft with memory. He said anger was like drinking poison and expecting someone else to die. Your mother said something similar earlier. She learned it from him. They were good people, Mr. Mansouri. Better than I am. Khalil moved back to the table, but instead of sitting across from Jamal, he chose the chair beside him. The gesture was small but significant, a crossing of battle lines. Tell me about him, Khalil said quietly. Not the engineer, not the inventor. Tell me about your father. Jamal looked surprised by the request. Why? Because for 23 years, I've tried not to think about Austin Williams as a real person. I've told myself he was just a business obstacle, a stepping stone to success. But sitting here, hearing his voice on that recording, Khalil's voice trailed off. I want to remember him the way he deserves to be remembered. For a long moment, Jamal said nothing. Then, slowly, he began to speak. He built me a treehouse when I was 8. Spent 3 weekends working on it. Even though we couldn't really afford the lumber, it wasn't fancy, just a platform between 2 oak trees in our backyard. But to me, it was a castle. Khalil found himself smiling. What made it special? He carved our names into the main support beam. Austin and Jamal Williams, engineers. I asked him why he called me an engineer when I was just a kid, and he said that engineering wasn't about having a degree or a job. It was about seeing problems and figuring out how to solve them. He was right. He was always right about things like that. He could look at any broken thing, a leaky faucet, a stalled car, my math homework, and find the solution. But he couldn't figure out how to protect his own family from what you did to us. The pain in Jamal's voice was fresh, immediate. Khalil felt it like a physical ache in his chest. "I'm sorry," he said, and meant it more completely than he had ever meant anything in his life. "I'm so sorry for what I took from you. From him. From your mother. I know you are. That's what's making this so hard." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, each lost in their own thoughts. Outside, the storm was beginning to weaken, the rain gentling from harsh percussion to soft whispers against the glass. "Can I tell you something?" Khalil asked eventually. "I've never been as happy as I was during those months working with your father. Not when I made my first million. Not when Forbes put me on their cover. Not when I bought my first yacht." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Working with Austin felt like coming home to a place I'd never been." "What do you mean?" "I grew up poor in Beirut. Really poor. The kind of poor where you go to bed hungry and wake up grateful for another day of hunger because it means you're still alive. When I got to America, when I got into MIT, I thought success meant never feeling that vulnerable again." Khalil's eyes grew distant, lost in memory. "But your father taught me something different. He showed me that real wealth wasn't about what you owned, but about what you could create, what you could give to the world. When we worked together, I felt valuable. Not because of what I had, but because of what I could do." What does true wealth mean to you? Is it what we accumulate, or what we contribute? Tell us your thoughts below. Then why did you betray him? The question was gentle, curious rather than accusatory. Avalil appreciated that. It gave him space to examine his motives honestly. "Because I was terrified that if I didn't take everything, I'd end up with nothing. I'd spent my whole life fighting for scraps, and when I finally had the chance for more than scraps, I panicked." He looked directly at Jamal. "I betrayed the best partnership I'd ever had because I was too scared to trust that it could last. And it cost you both everything." "It cost us both everything," Khalil agreed. "Your father lost his invention, his reputation, his future. I lost the person I was when I was with him. The person who believed engineering was about solving problems, not creating them." Jamal studied him for a long moment. "What happened to that person?" "I buried him, told myself he was naive, weak, unsuited for the business world. I spent 23 years building walls around that part of myself, making sure it could never hurt me again. And now I realize that the person I buried was the only version of myself worth being." The admission seemed to surprise Khalil, as much as it surprised Jamal. They sat with the weight of it, two men finally being honest about the cost of their choices. "I brought something else," Jamal said suddenly, reaching into his jacket. He pulled out a small wooden object, a hand-carved chess piece, a king worn smooth by decades of handling. "My father made this for me when I was 10. Said every engineer needed to think strategically, to see the whole board, not just the next move." He placed it on the table between them. "I've carried it ever since. It's supposed to remind me to be smart, to think things through." "And has it?" Jamal laughed, and for the first time since Khalil had met him, the sound carried genuine warmth. "Not even close. If I was smart, I would have exposed you on the internet and walked away. Instead, I'm sitting in a conference room having an emotional conversation with the man who ruined my life." "Why aren't you? Being smart, I mean." "Because," Jamal hesitated, then forged ahead. "Because my father didn't raise me to be smart. He raised me to be good. And walking away without giving you a chance to be better would have disappointed him." The words hit Khalil like a revelation. All his life he had confused intelligence with cunning, success with victory, power with strength. But sitting here with Austin Williams's son, he was beginning to understand the difference between being smart and being wise. "He would be proud of you," Khalil said quietly. "Your father. He would be proud of the man you've become." "You think so?" "I know so. You came here carrying 23 years of justified anger, and instead of using it to destroy me, you're trying to find a way to honor his memory. That takes a special kind of courage." Jamal wiped his eyes, embarrassed by the display of emotion. "I don't feel courageous. I feel lost." "Good," Khalil said, surprising him. "Lost means you're still looking for the right path. Certainty is what got us both into this mess." They were interrupted by a soft knock on the conference room door. Through the glass, they could see a figure in maintenance coveralls holding a flashlight. "Mr. Mansouri." The voice was muffled but recognizable. "Sir, we've got partial power restored to this floor, and there's someone here to see both of you." Khalil and Jamal exchanged glances. "Who?" "Mrs. Williams, sir. She says she's not leaving until she talks to both of you." Through the glass, they could see Fatima Williams standing in the corridor, her modest dress and hijab making her look like a guardian angel in the red emergency lighting. Despite spending the day trapped in a building without power, she looked serene, patient, as if she had all the time in the world. "She knew," Jamal said suddenly. "She knew we'd end up here, talking like this." "How could she know?" "Because she knows me. And apparently, she knows you too." Jamal stood, moving toward the door. "She said you weren't a monster, remember? Maybe she was right." Maybe she was. As they prepared to face Fatima Williams, the woman who had suffered most from their shared history, Khalil felt something he hadn't experienced in decades. Not the thrill of a successful deal, or the satisfaction of defeating a competitor, but something quieter, more profound. Hope. Not for victory or vindication, but for the possibility of becoming the man Austin Williams had once believed him to be. The man who had shared coffee and dreams in a cramped apartment, who had seen engineering as a calling rather than a business, who had valued partnership over power. The man who might still find a way to honor the memory of a good man and heal the family he had broken. "Are you ready?" Jamal asked, his hand on the door handle. Khalil looked at the chess piece on the table, the king that had guided a boy through the loss of his father and into the complicated territory of forgiveness. Then he looked at the manila folder full of evidence that could destroy everything he had built. Finally, he looked at Jamal Williams, the son who carried his father's genius and his mother's grace, who had somehow found the strength to see past 23 years of justified anger. "I'm ready," Khalil said. And for the first time in decades, he meant it completely. The door opened to reveal Fatima Williams flanked by two men in expensive suits, lawyers by the look of them, with the predatory bearing of sharks scenting blood in the water. Behind them stood Ahmad, Khalil's head of security, his face grim with the weight of bad news. "Mrs. Williams," Khalil said, rising from his chair. "Neither was I," she replied, her voice tight with controlled anger. "But it seems we don't get to choose our timing today." The taller of the two lawyers stepped forward, his smile sharp enough to cut glass. "Mr. Mansouri, I'm David Chen from Morrison, Walsh & Associates. We represent several parties with significant interests in this situation." Jamal moved protectively closer to his mother. "Mama, what's going on? Who are these men?" "Vultures," Fatima said simply. "They found out about your recording, Habibi. About the evidence you've been gathering." Chen's smile widened. "Mrs. Williams is being modest. We represent a consortium of investors who have been monitoring Mansouri Industries for some time, waiting for the right opportunity to address certain irregularities in the company's founding." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Khalil felt the familiar weight of impending catastrophe settling on his shoulders. "What do you want?" he asked, though he suspected he already knew. "Justice," said the second lawyer, a woman with steel-gray hair and eyes to match. "I'm Patricia Goldberg, representing the Williams estate. We're prepared to file a class action lawsuit on behalf of everyone who has suffered from the fraudulent practices of Mansouri Industries." Jamal stepped forward. "I never hired you. I never contacted any lawyers." "You didn't need to," Chen replied smoothly. "Your digital footprint has been quite informative. The research you've been conducting, the private investigator you hired, the building access records showing your pattern of surveillance, it all paints a very clear picture." Ahmad cleared his throat. "Sir, they have documentation." Financial records, witness statements, expert testimony prepared by engineering firms. This isn't just about the original patent theft anymore. Khalil's blood ran cold. What else? Goldberg opened her briefcase and spread documents across the conference table, pushing aside the manila folder that had started this entire confrontation. Systematic bid rigging on government contracts, illegal dumping of manufacturing waste in developing countries, tax evasion through shell corporations in the Cayman Islands. We estimate damages in excess of $2 billion. Those allegations are baseless. Are they? Chen interrupted. Because we have a former employee willing to testify that you knew about all of it. Your former VP of Operations, Hassan al-Rashid. He's been very cooperative since his recent bankruptcy. The name hit Khalil like a physical blow. Hussein had been his right-hand man for 15 years before their falling out 2 years ago. If Hussein was talking, he's lying. Whatever he told you is corroborated by your own internal communications, Goldberg said, producing a tablet. Email threads, recorded phone calls, financial transfers. Hassan kept very thorough records. Khalil's world tilted on its axis. The careful empire he had built, the reputation he had cultivated, the future he had secured for his children, all of it balanced on the edge of complete destruction. What do you want? He asked again, his voice barely steady. Complete disclosure, Chen replied. Full admission of guilt regarding the theft of Austin Williams's intellectual property, public acknowledgement of all fraudulent business practices, and financial compensation to all affected parties. That's not justice, Jamal said suddenly, his voice carrying a note of disgust. That's a feeding frenzy. Chen turned to him with surprise. Mr. Williams, you've spent 3 years building a case against this man. Surely you want to see him face consequences for his actions. I want my father's name cleared. I want the truth to come out. I don't want to destroy thousands of innocent jobs or profit from other people's suffering. Your family deserves compensation. My family deserves justice, not revenge. Jamal moved closer to his mother, his voice growing stronger. And we certainly don't deserve to be represented by lawyers we never hired, pursuing claims we never authorized. Fatima placed a gentle hand on her son's arm. These men came to our apartment this morning, after the power went out. They said they had been watching us, waiting for the right moment to approach. Watching us? For months, Habibi. They knew about your investigation, your evidence, your plans. They've been preparing their own case, using our story as the foundation. The realization hit Jamal like a sledgehammer. You were never going to let me handle this my own way. You were planning to use me as a weapon against him, whether I wanted it or not. Chen's mask of professional courtesy slipped slightly. Mr. Williams, you're being emotional. Think about what's best for your family's future. Don't tell me what's best for my family. Jamal shot back. You don't even know us. You just see dollar signs and headlines. When seeking justice, how do we ensure we don't become the very thing we're fighting against? Sometimes the pursuit of what's right can corrupt our souls. What are your thoughts? Ahmad stepped forward. Sir, there's more. The story has already leaked to the press. Al Jazeera, CNN, the Financial Times. They all have advance copies of the allegations. The first reports go live in 2 hours. Khalil sank into his chair, the weight of impending catastrophe crushing down on him. Everything he had worked for, everything he had built, would be destroyed in a matter of hours. But worse than the business consequences was the look of betrayal on Jamal's face. You planned this, Jamal said to the lawyers, his voice thick with disgust. You manipulated us into this confrontation, knowing the building would be locked down, knowing we'd be trapped together. You wanted him emotional, vulnerable, ready to confess. We wanted the truth to come out, Goldberg replied. Sometimes that requires creative timing. This isn't truth. This is exploitation. Fatima moved to stand beside her son, her quiet dignity, a sharp contrast to the predatory energy radiating from the lawyers. Gentlemen, I think you should leave. Mrs. Williams, we're trying to help you. You're trying to help yourselves. Her voice carried the quiet authority of a woman who had endured decades of struggle with grace intact. My husband was a good man who believed in fairness and justice. What you're proposing isn't justice. It's revenge disguised as righteousness. Chen's patience was wearing thin. With respect, Mrs. Williams, this man destroyed your family. He stole your husband's life's work and left you to struggle in poverty for decades. Don't you want him to pay for that? I want him to make amends, she replied calmly. That's different from destroying him. Sometimes they're the same thing. No, Jamal said firmly. They're never the same thing. Destruction doesn't heal wounds. It just creates new ones. Khalil looked up at the young man who had every right to want his destruction, who had been manipulated and used by lawyers seeking profit from pain, and felt something break open in his chest. You could walk away, he said quietly. Right now, let them do what they're going to do. You'd be rich, your father's name would be cleared, and I'd get exactly what I deserve. Is that what you want? The question hung in the air between them. Khalil thought about his children, who would grow up with the stain of their father's crimes. His employees, who would lose their jobs when the company collapsed. The investors who trusted him, the partners who believed in him, the thousands of people whose lives were connected to the empire he had built on stolen dreams. But mostly, he thought about Austin Williams, the good man whose ghost had haunted this entire day. What I want doesn't matter anymore, Khalil said. What matters is what's right. Then you know what you have to do, Chen said, sensing victory. But it was Jamal who answered. Yes, he does. The young man turned to face the lawyers, his jaw set with determination. Get out. Excuse me. I said, get out. You're fired. All of you. We don't want your representation. We don't want your lawsuits, and we don't want your blood money. Goldberg's composure cracked. Mr. Williams, you're making a terrible mistake. This is your one chance to make this man pay for what he did to your family. Making him pay and making things right aren't the same thing, Jamal replied. My father taught me that, and right now you're the ones preventing justice from happening. The lawyers exchanged glances, clearly not prepared for this turn of events. The story is already out there, Chen warned. The press will run it whether you cooperate or not. Then that's their choice, Fatima said calmly. But it won't be ours. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Goldberg began gathering her documents, her face tight with frustrated ambition. You'll regret this. Both of you. When the dust settles and you're still living in poverty while he walks away free, remember that you chose this. We'll remember that we chose dignity over revenge, Jamal replied. That's what my father would have wanted. The lawyers left with the bitter efficiency of predators denied their kill. Ahmad lingered for a moment, his face troubled. Sir, the media attention, even without their cooperation, this could still destroy the company. I know, Khalil said quietly. Thank you, Ahmad, for everything. You've been loyal to a fault. After Ahmad left, the three of them stood in the conference room's red emergency lighting, surrounded by the detritus of a confrontation that had spiraled far beyond anyone's control. I'm sorry, Khalil said finally. I'm sorry you were used. I'm sorry your pain was turned into a weapon. I'm sorry that trying to make things right has created an even bigger mess. Jamal looked at him with something that might have been sympathy. It's not your fault this time. They would have moved against you whether I was involved or not. But they used your story to justify it. Your father's pain to legitimize their greed. Yes, they did. Jamal's voice was heavy with the weight of realization. And that's worse than anything you ever did to us. At least when you betrayed my father, you did it yourself. You didn't hide behind lawyers and legal technicalities. The admission hung between them like a bridge across 23 years of pain. But even as they found understanding, the world outside was preparing to tear apart everything they had both worked to build. In 2 hours, the story would break. In 2 hours, Khalil's empire would begin to crumble. And there was nothing any of them could do to stop it. The storm outside had ended, but the real tempest was just beginning. The emergency lighting flickered as partial power returned to the building, casting shifting shadows across the conference room, where three people sat in contemplative silence. Outside, the storm had passed, leaving behind a city washed clean under star-filled skies. But inside, the approaching media hurricane felt more dangerous than any natural disaster. Khalil's phone buzzed insistently. His board of directors, investors, business partners, all demanding explanations for rumors that were spreading through financial networks like wildfire. He ignored them all, his attention focused on the manila folder that had started this entire journey. 1 hour and 43 minutes, he said quietly, checking his watch. That's how long we have before the story breaks. Jamal sat across from him, the wooden chess piece rolling between his fingers as he wrestled with thoughts he couldn't quite articulate. It doesn't have to end this way. Doesn't it? Khalil's voice carried the weight of exhaustion and acceptance. Even if those lawyers hadn't gotten involved, the truth was always going to come out. You made sure of that. I made sure you had a choice, Jamal corrected. You still do. Fatima, who had been quietly observing both men, finally spoke. What choice, Habibi? Jamal looked at his mother, then at Khalil, his mind working through possibilities that had seemed impossible just hours earlier. We control the narrative, not the lawyers, not the media. What do you mean? I mean, we tell the story ourselves. The whole story, not just the betrayal, but everything that came after. The conversation we've had today. The choice to do better. Khalil frowned, not following the logic. That won't change the facts. I still stole your father's invention. The patents are still in my name. The damage is still done. The damage to the past can't be changed, Jamal agreed. But the future, that's still up for grabs. He stood and began pacing, energy building in his voice as the idea took shape. What if instead of trying to hide from this scandal, you got ahead of it? What if you called a press conference in, he checked his watch, 1 hour and 30 minutes and told the truth yourself? Jamal, Fatima said gently, that would destroy everything he's built. Maybe, or maybe it would transform it into something worth building. Khalil studied the young man's face, seeing echoes of Austin Williams's innovative thinking. You're talking about corporate suicide. I'm talking about corporate rebirth. Austin Williams Water Technologies, co-founded by you and my father, with his family as equal partners. Jamal's voice grew stronger as the vision crystallized. Full acknowledgement of the original theft, complete transparency about past mistakes, and a commitment to using the company's resources to make amends. The investors would never accept it. The board would have me removed. Then you get new investors, new board members. People who believe in building something meaningful rather than just profitable. Khalil was quiet for a long moment, his mind racing through the implications. It would be starting over from nothing, worse than nothing, starting over with a publicly admitted history of fraud. Yes, it would. I'd lose everything. My reputation, my wealth, my position in society. Everything except your integrity, Jamal said quietly. Everything except the chance to become the man my father thought you were. What would you give up to reclaim your soul? Sometimes the hardest choice is between what we've built and who we really are. Share your thoughts below. Fatima looked between the two men, seeing something that maybe they couldn't see themselves yet. You're talking about more than business partnership. What do you mean, Mama? I mean, you're talking like family, like people who care about each other's futures. She smiled, and for the first time all day, it reached her eyes. Your father would be amazed. The word hung in the air, family. It seemed impossible after everything that had happened. But somehow, in the span of one extraordinary day, bitter enemies had found their way to something approaching kinship. There's another problem, Khalil said, his voice careful. Even if I could make this work, even if we could rebuild the company as partners, the lawyers were right about one thing. I haven't just stolen your father's invention. Over the years, I've made other compromises, other questionable decisions. If we're being completely honest, then we're honest about all of it, Jamal said firmly. Complete transparency, complete accountability, no more secrets, no more lies. That could mean criminal charges, prison time. It could. Are you prepared for that? Khalil thought about his children, who would grow up knowing their father as either a coward who hid from his crimes or a man who faced them with dignity. He thought about Austin Williams, whose ghost had haunted his success for 23 years. He thought about the person he had been in that cramped apartment, sharing coffee and dreams with a good man who believed in him. "I don't know," he admitted. "I'm terrified." "Good," Fatima said, surprising both men. "Fear means you understand what you're risking. But courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing the right thing despite the fear. And what if it doesn't work? What if we try to rebuild and fail? What if the scandal destroys any chance of success?" Jamal smiled, and for a moment Khalil saw Austin Williams in his son's expression, the same combination of determination and hope that had made him believe in impossible dreams. "Then we fail together, as partners, as family, and at least we'll fail doing something worthy of my father's memory." The room fell quiet again, each of them wrestling with the magnitude of what they were contemplating. Outside, the city sparkled with renewed life after the storm, but inside, they were preparing to walk into a hurricane of their own making. Khalil's phone rang, his eldest son calling from university in London. "I should take this," he said, stepping away from the table. "Baba?" The young man's voice was tight with concern. "I'm seeing things on social media. Something about the company, about fraud allegations." Khalil closed his eyes, feeling the weight of fatherhood in ways he had never experienced before. "Some difficult truths are coming to light. Things I did long before you were born, but things that affect our family's future. Are they true?" The question that would define everything. Khalil looked at Jamal and Fatima, who were watching him with expressions of quiet support, and felt something shift in his chest. "Yes," he said simply. "They're true. And tomorrow, I'm going to start making amends for them." "What does that mean for us? For the company?" "I don't know yet, but I want you to know that whatever happens, I love you, and I'm going to try to become a father you can be proud of." After he hung up, Khalil turned back to Jamal and Fatima. "He asked me if the allegations were true. What did you tell him?" "The truth. For the first time in his life, I told him the complete truth about who his father really is." "And how did that feel?" Khalil considered the question, surprised by his own answer. "Terrifying and liberating." Jamal nodded, understanding completely. That's what truth does. It destroys and creates at the same time. "So what's it going to be?" Fatima asked gently. "Are you going to let those lawyers control your story, or are you going to write your own ending?" Khalil looked at the folder full of evidence, then at the chess piece that had guided a boy through loss toward wisdom, then at the two people who had every reason to hate him, but had instead chosen to offer him a chance at redemption. "I'm going to call a press conference," he said, his voice growing stronger with each word. "I'm going to tell the whole truth about what I did to Austin Williams and his family. I'm going to announce the transformation of Mansouri Industries into Austin Williams Water Technologies. And I'm going to ask for Jamal's help in rebuilding something worthy of his father's genius. And if it fails, then it fails. But it will fail with honor instead of succeeding with shame." Jamal extended his hand across the table. "Partners?" Khalil looked at the offered handshake, so similar to the one he had betrayed 23 years ago, but carrying the possibility of redemption instead of deception. "Partners," he said, clasping Jamal's hand in both of his own. Outside, the media was already gathering, drawn by rumors of scandal and corporate destruction. But inside a conference room on the third floor of what would soon be renamed Austin Williams Tower, three people were planning something that had nothing to do with destruction, and everything to do with the radical act of choosing love over fear, partnership over power, and truth over convenience. The storm had passed. The real work was just beginning. 6 months later, the gleaming letters Austin Williams Water Technologies stretched across the 47th floor of what had once been Mansouri Tower. The morning sun caught the gold threading in the name, casting it in warm light that seemed to breathe life into the words themselves. Khalil stood at the window of what used to be his private office, now the shared executive suite he split with his business partner. The view was the same, but everything else had changed. The mahogany furniture had been replaced with simple, functional pieces. The walls that once displayed his awards now held photographs of clean water projects around the world, each one bearing a small plaque that read in memory of Austin Williams, engineer and visionary. "The presentation starts in 10 minutes, Jamal said, entering with 2 cups of coffee, Turkish style, with cardamom, just the way his father used to make it. "Are you nervous?" Khalil asked, accepting the cup with hands that had learned to work alongside others rather than simply command. "Terrified," Jamal admitted with a smile. "The same." They were about to present their biggest project yet to the United Nations Water Council, a revolutionary filtration system that could provide clean drinking water to refugee camps around the world. It was based on Austin Williams's original designs, refined and expanded by his son's engineering brilliance, and funded by what remained of Khalil's fortune after legal settlements, restitution payments, and the corporate restructuring that had followed his public confession. The media firestorm had been everything they'd feared and more. For 3 months, every business publication in the world had dissected the fall of Khalil Mansouri with the gleeful precision of vultures stripping a carcass. Stock prices had plummeted. Investors had fled. Half the board had resigned in disgrace. But something unexpected had emerged from the wreckage. "Mr. Mansouri, Mr. Williams." Fatima appeared in the doorway, elegant in a navy blue business suit that marked her transformation from cleaning lady to director of community outreach. "The delegation from UNICEF has arrived." "Thank you, Mama," Jamal said, then caught himself. Even after 6 months, it still felt strange to use family terms in a business setting. But that was part of what made Austin Williams Water Technologies different. It was built on the radical notion that business could be personal, that profit could serve purpose, and that the most important partnerships were the ones that acknowledged the full humanity of everyone involved. "Are you sure about this?" Khalil asked as they walked toward the conference room. "It's not too late to back out. We could sell the technology to a larger company, let them handle the UN contract, and let them take credit for my father's work. Not a chance." Jamal's voice carried the quiet confidence he had inherited from Austin Williams, tempered by the wisdom he had gained through forgiveness. "Besides, someone once told me that engineering isn't about having a degree or a job. It's about seeing problems and figuring out how to solve them." Smart man. The smartest. They entered the conference room where representatives from 12 countries waited around a table that had been specially crafted from reclaimed wood, sustainable, functional, and beautiful in its simplicity. These were people who had seen too much suffering, too much bureaucratic failure, too many promises broken by corporate greed. They were not easy to impress. "Ladies and gentlemen," Khalil began, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what they were proposing. 6 months ago, my partner and I made a decision that many people called professional suicide. We chose truth over profit, partnership over power, and responsibility over reputation. He gestured to a photograph on the wall, Austin Williams in his small Detroit workshop, surrounded by the tools and dreams that would eventually change millions of lives. "The technology we're about to show you was invented 35 years ago by a brilliant engineer named Austin Williams. For too many years, his contributions were hidden, his name erased from history. Today we're here to honor his memory by using his genius to solve one of humanity's greatest challenges." Jamal stepped forward, activating a holographic display that showed their filtration system in action. The technology was elegant in its simplicity, solar-powered, maintenance-free, capable of purifying thousands of gallons of contaminated water per day, using nothing but locally available materials. The Williams filtration system can be manufactured locally using components available in any developing economy, Jamal explained, his voice growing stronger as he moved through the technical specifications. No expensive imports, no complex maintenance schedules, no dependence on foreign expertise. Communities can build, operate, and repair these systems themselves. The UNICEF representative, Dr. Sarah Chen, leaned forward with interest. "What's the cost per unit?" $1,200, Khalil replied, including training, installation, and a 5-year supply of replacement components. The number sent a ripple of surprise through the room. Comparable systems from major manufacturers cost 10 times as much. "How is that possible?" asked the delegate from Bangladesh. Jamal and Khalil exchanged a glance, the look that had become their signature, a moment of silent communication that spoke to the partnership they had built from the ashes of betrayal. Because we're not trying to maximize profit, Khalil said simply. We're trying to maximize impact. Every system we sell is priced to cover costs, plus a modest margin that goes directly into research and development for the next generation of technology. And into the Austin Williams Foundation, Jamal added, which provides engineering scholarships for students from underserved communities around the world. Dr. Chen made notes on her tablet. We'd need to see field tests, safety certifications, long-term reliability data. Of course, Khalil replied, pulling up another display. We've been running pilot programs in Jordan, Kenya, and Guatemala for the past 4 months. The results speak for themselves. The data was impressive, not just the technical performance, but the human impact. Communities that had struggled with waterborne illness were reporting dramatic improvements in health outcomes. Children who had spent hours each day walking to distant water sources were attending school. Women who had been trapped in cycles of survival were starting businesses, pursuing education, building futures. There's something else, Jamal said, his voice carrying a note of emotion that made everyone in the room pay closer attention. We're not just selling technology. We're building partnerships. Every community that implements our system becomes part of a global network, sharing innovations, supporting each other, creating solutions that work for their specific needs. A network built on the principle that clean water is a human right, not a luxury commodity, Khalil added. The presentation continued for another hour, covering technical specifications, implementation timelines, and funding structures. But as the questions grew more detailed, as the interest became more genuine, everyone in the room understood that they were witnessing something rare, a business proposal driven not by profit margins, but by moral imagination. What kind of legacy do you want to leave? Is it enough to be successful? Or do we have a responsibility to use our success to heal the world? Let us know your thoughts. Finally, Dr. Chen closed her tablet and looked directly at both men. Gentlemen, I have one final question. Why should we trust you? Mr. Mansouri, your past actions show a pattern of prioritizing personal gain over ethical responsibility. How do we know this isn't just an elaborate public relations campaign? The question hung in the air like a challenge. It was fair, necessary, and potentially devastating. Khalil felt the weight of every mistake he had ever made pressing down on his shoulders. But before he could respond, Jamal spoke. Because I trust him, he said simply. 6 months ago, I came here planning to destroy this man. I had evidence of his crimes, justification for my anger, and the power to ruin everything he had built. Instead, I discovered something I didn't expect, the possibility of redemption. He looked directly at Khalil, and in his eyes was something that had taken months to build and would take a lifetime to honor. My father believed that people could change, that mistakes could be transformed into wisdom, that even the worst betrayals could become the foundation for something beautiful. Khalil Mansouri stole my father's invention and destroyed my family's life. But the man sitting next to me has spent 6 months proving that he can be better than his worst choices. And how has he proven that? Dr. Chen asked. By giving up everything he gained through those choices, by making my father's name equal to his own on every patent, every product, every piece of recognition, by turning over 60% of his personal wealth to restitution and community development, by transforming a company built on theft into an organization dedicated to justice. Khalil found his voice. Dr. Chen. I can't change what I did 35 years ago. I can't undo the harm I caused to the Williams family, or the communities that could have benefited from Austin's innovations decades earlier. But I can spend the rest of my life making sure that his genius serves the purpose he intended, making clean water available to everyone who needs it. Even if it costs you everything. Especially if it costs me everything. Because everything I had was built on someone else's stolen dreams. This partnership, this company, this technology, it's my chance to build something worth having. The room fell quiet. Outside, the city of Dubai hummed with the constant motion of commerce and ambition. But inside, 12 representatives from around the world contemplated a proposal that challenged everything they thought they knew about international development and corporate responsibility. Finally, Dr. Chen smiled. "Gentlemen, on behalf of the United Nations Water Council, I'm pleased to inform you that we'd like to move forward with a pilot program. 50 systems to start, with the potential for global expansion if the results meet expectations." The words hit like lightning. Jamal and Khalil looked at each other, then at Fatima, who was watching from the back of the room with tears streaming down her face. They had done it. Against all odds, despite every obstacle, in defiance of every expert who had said it was impossible, they had built something worthy of Austin Williams's memory. "There's one condition," Dr. Chen added. "We want this story told. The full story, the theft, the betrayal, the forgiveness, the partnership. The world needs to know that redemption is possible, that people can change, that the worst mistakes can become the foundation for the greatest triumphs." "Are you comfortable with that?" she asked Khalil directly. He thought about his children, who had learned to be proud of their father, not for his wealth, but for his courage. He thought about Austin Williams, whose name would now be spoken with respect in boardrooms around the world. He thought about the communities that would have clean water because of a partnership built from the ashes of betrayal. "I'm more than comfortable with it," he said. "I'm honored by it." 1 year later, Jamal Williams stood in the same Detroit neighborhood where his father had once dreamed of changing the world. The house was different. The Austin Williams Community Center now occupied the lot where their old apartment building had stood, but the spirit of innovation and hope remained unchanged. Inside the center, 30 young engineers from around the world were working on the next generation of water purification technology. The Austin Williams Fellowship Program had attracted the brightest minds from 6 continents, all united by a shared commitment to solving humanity's greatest challenges. "Your father would be so proud," Fatima said, joining her son at the window overlooking the workshop where holographic displays showed clean water flowing in refugee camps from Syria to South Sudan. "I hope so, Mama. I really hope so." Khalil approached from across the room, his appearance transformed by a year of meaningful work. Gone was the polished corporate executive, replaced by a man whose hands were stained with honest labor, and whose eyes held the peace that comes from alignment between values and actions. "The Guatemala installation is complete," he reported. 12,000 people now have access to clean water. The village chief wants to name the central plaza after your father. And the Bangladesh program. Ahead of schedule and under budget, the local engineering team has already proposed 3 modifications that could improve efficiency by 15%. They had found their rhythm. Jamal handling the technical innovation, Khalil managing the business operations, and Fatima ensuring that every project honored the human dignity of the communities they served. It was partnership in its truest form, built not on contracts or profit-sharing agreements, but on mutual respect and shared purpose. "There's something else," Khalil said, producing an envelope with the UN logo. "The Secretary General wants to present the Austin Williams Peace Prize at next month's General Assembly." The Austin Williams Peace Prize, an annual recognition for innovations that advanced human rights through technology. It had been Jamal's idea, funded by Khalil's remaining wealth, and endorsed by world leaders who understood that Austin Williams's story represented something larger than one man's genius. "Will you accept it with me?" Jamal asked. "As partners. As family." The words still carried weight between them. Family chosen rather than born into. Family forged in the crucible of honesty, and maintained through the daily choice to see past old wounds toward new possibilities. "I'd be honored," Khalil replied. Outside, the Detroit River flowed toward the Great Lakes, carrying with it the dreams and hopes of millions of people. In workshop spaces around the world, engineers trained in the Austin Williams program were designing solutions to problems that had plagued humanity for centuries. And in boardrooms from New York to Singapore, executives were learning that the most profitable businesses were those that put purpose before profit. The revolution Austin Williams had dreamed of was finally beginning, not through corporate dominance or technological supremacy, but through the radical act of choosing partnership over power, forgiveness over vengeance, and love over fear. In the end, that was his greatest invention of all. Not just a machine that could purify water, but a model for purifying hearts. Not just a filter that could remove toxins from liquid, but a process for removing bitterness from souls. Not just a technology that could serve communities, but a partnership that could heal families. "Daddy?" Jamal whispered to the photograph of Austin Williams that hung in place of honor at the center's entrance. "We did it. We finally did it." And in the warmth of the afternoon sun streaming through the windows, in the laughter of young engineers discovering their potential, in the quiet satisfaction of work that mattered, Austin Williams's spirit lived on. Not as a ghost haunting past betrayals, but as a guiding light illuminating the path toward a future where genius serves love, where partnership transcends pain, and where the greatest victories are won not by defeating enemies, but by transforming them into family. The story that had begun with theft and ended with redemption was complete. But the legacy it created would continue for generations yet to come. What story will your life tell? Will it be about what you achieved for yourself or what you created for others? Share your thoughts below, and remember, it's never too late to choose love over fear, partnership over power, and redemption over revenge.
Thank you for watching The Weight of Forgiveness, a story of stolen dreams and unexpected love. If this story moved you, please subscribe to our channel and share it with someone who needs to hear that redemption is always possible. Your comments and engagement help us continue creating stories that matter. If you felt every emotion in this story, the next one will completely transform you. It's wilder, deeper, and more heartbreaking than you could ever expect. Your next emotional journey is just one click away. Tap that story showing on your screen now. Thank you for being part of this beautiful moment with us.